Well, I want to thank you all for being here today, and I want to thank the children for standing on this stage and being brave and making their voices heard. I want to say a few words regarding COVID-19 related public health mandates. Recently, we've been seeing face mask mandates and vaccine passport requirements being temporarily withdrawn ahead of the upcoming midterm elections in November. But it's important to understand that these mandatory face mask policies and vaccine passport requirements could easily be brought back into effect this next winter after the elections are over. In some cities, like Los Angeles, vaccine passports have yet to be withdrawn and are still required to be able to eat at a restaurant, go to a bar, or sit down in a cafe. California has also decided to mandate COVID vaccines in order for children to be able to attend school. And this is despite the fact that COVID vaccines do not stop infection or transmission of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and therefore cannot stop the spread of COVID-19. But science and logic be damned. California is apparently hell-bent on turning our children into pincushions for pharmaceutical profits. The danger for us here in Oregon is that these mandatory vaccination policies first start in California, but then have a tendency to creep into our state here in Oregon. Interestingly, while California has decided to mandate COVID vaccines for school children, the Surgeon General of Florida recently recommended against giving healthy children COVID vaccines. How many of you heard about that? The Surgeon General of Florida recommended against giving healthy children COVID vaccines. Similarly, the country of Sweden decided to not recommend COVID vaccines for 5 to 11-year-old children. Florida and Sweden made these recommendations because, in their estimation, the benefits of COVID vaccination did not outweigh the risks for young children who are at exceptionally low risk from COVID-19 to begin with. Meanwhile, however, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, recommends COVID vaccines for all children, 5 years of age and older. So who are we to believe? Do we trust the CDC's recommendation to vaccinate children 5 years or older? Or do we trust Florida and Sweden and not give COVID vaccines to our children? And to answer this question, we need to understand that the FDA relied on a critically flawed risk-benefit assessment to justify approving COVID vaccines for kids in this age group. So this is a little bit in the weeds, but if you want to understand the answer to this question, we need to know that the FDA was able to conclude that the benefits of COVID vaccination outweigh the risks only by ignoring the fact that millions of American children had already been exposed to the virus and already developed natural immunity against it. And so for these millions of American children who already have natural immunity, COVID vaccination is basically all risk and no benefit. And this is because natural immunity is superior to vaccine-induced immunity, which we now know rapidly wanes over time and requires additional booster doses every several months. So the FDA ignored natural immunity when making their risk-benefit assessment. Moreover, to minimize the risks of COVID vaccines, the FDA only accounted for risks from one side effect of the vaccine, And that's called myocarditis and pericarditis, which is inflammation of the heart. That's the only COVID vaccine side effect that they took into account. They ignored all other vaccine side effects when they made their risk-benefit calculation. And even then, the FDA used a rate of myocarditis following vaccination that's half. Go Truckers! So the FDA used a rate of myocarditis that's half the actual rate. So basically, by manipulating data in this way, the FDA was able to say that yes, the benefits of vaccination outweigh the risks when really they do not. And once the FDA approved the vaccine, that allowed the CDC to then recommend it for all children. And that decision by the CDC emboldened California to then mandate that vaccine for all school children across the state. Looking ahead, as early as next month, the FDA may approve COVID vaccines for very young children, 6 months of age through 4 years old. So in order to understand how this happens, it's important to know that 45% of the FDA's budget comes from the very industry that they're supposed to be regulating. In other words, almost half the FDA's budget comes from big pharma itself. And these kinds of financial conflicts of interest have turned our regulatory agencies into sock puppets of the pharmaceutical industry. I'm sorry to say that our CDC is a corrupt agency.
It's a terrorist organization.
And if you don't believe me, do an internet search for an article titled "How the CDC Abandoned Science," written by Dr. Vinay Prasad, and read for yourself how the CDC has been publishing propaganda masquerading as science. Our public health agencies have done us a grave disservice over the past 2 years with lockdowns that have done more harm than good, with ineffective face mask mandates, and with unethical vaccine mandates. Our job is to undo this medical tyranny and make sure that it never happens again. And one way we can help make that happen is by electing better leaders into our government. People who will champion medical freedom and defend our right to informed consent. And some of these people have spoken on this stage already and are here today. So let's give them our support. Let's give them our vote. Thank you all very much. God bless.